Most men have this completely backwards. They think that giving a woman more attention, more validation, more of their time and energy will make her more attracted to them. But Carl Jung discovered something about human psychology that reveals why this approach not only fails, it actually repels the very person you're trying to attract. Here's what Jung understood that most men never will. What we call ignoring someone isn't actually about ignoring them at all. It's about redirecting your attention to something far more powerful, yourself. And when you do this correctly, when you apply what Jung called conscious self-focus, something almost magical happens in the psychology of attraction. But here's where most men get this dangerously wrong. They think ignoring means being cold, cruel, or playing manipulative games. They use withdrawal as a weapon to punish or control. But Jung's approach is the complete opposite. It's about becoming so psychologically complete, so genuinely focused on your own growth and purpose, that you naturally become less available for the drama and neediness that destroys attraction. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what Jung meant by psychological sovereignty, and why the men who master this principle don't have to chase anyone, because people naturally gravitate toward their centered, self-possessed energy. But first, you need to face the uncomfortable truth about why your attention-seeking behavior has been sabotaging your success with women. Are you ready for this revelation? The attention addiction epidemic. Here's what Carl Jung observed about modern masculinity that will completely change how you see your interactions with women. Most men are unconsciously addicted to female attention, and this addiction makes them psychologically weak, emotionally needy, and ultimately repulsive to the very women they're trying to attract. Jung called this external validation dependency, when your sense of worth, your emotional state, and your self-image become dependent on how others respond to you. And nowhere is this more obvious than in how men behave around attractive women. They light up when she texts back quickly, they crash when she doesn't respond, they analyze every interaction for signs of approval or rejection. Think about your own behavior honestly. How many times have you checked your phone hoping for her message? How many times have you crafted the perfect text only to feel your stomach drop when hours pass without a response? How many times have you changed your plans, your opinions, or even your personality to try to win her approval? Jung understood that this behavior isn't love or even attraction. It's psychological dependence disguised as romance. And women can sense this neediness immediately, even when you think you're hiding it well. They can feel the desperate energy behind your attention, the way you're using their responses to regulate your own emotional state. But here's what Jung discovered that changes everything. When you're constantly seeking someone's attention, you're unconsciously communicating that you don't believe you're worthy of attention on your own. You're essentially saying, please validate my existence because I can't validate it myself. And this energy is not just unattractive, it's energetically suffocating. Jung wrote extensively about what he called projection, the unconscious process where we project our internal states onto others. When you're attention-seeking, you're projecting neediness, insecurity, and what Jung termed psychological incompleteness onto every interaction. You're not offering value, you're seeking it. And here's the brutal truth that Jung uncovered. The more attention you give to someone who hasn't earned it, the less valuable that attention becomes. It's basic human psychology. We don't value what's freely available. When you're always there, always responding, always available, you train people to take your attention for granted. Jung observed that this creates what he called energetic devaluation. Your presence becomes associated with neediness rather than value. Instead of being seen as a gift, your attention becomes seen as a given. Instead of being mysterious and intriguing, you become predictable and boring. But the most damaging part of this attention addiction is what it does to your own psychology. Jung found that when you make your emotional well-being dependent on external responses, you lose touch with your own center, your own purpose, your own sense of self. You become a psychological puppet, dancing to the rhythm of other people's moods and responses. This is why Jung emphasized that true psychological health requires what he called internal locus of control, the ability to generate your own sense of worth, your own emotional stability, your own validation from within. And this internal strength is exactly what creates the magnetic quality that draws others toward you. The shadow of false ignoring. Now we need to address the shadow side of this concept, because most men who try to ignore women do it from a place of wounded ego, manipulation, or revenge. And this approach not only fails, it often makes things worse. Jung would have been horrified by the toxic ways this principle gets misapplied. Jung spent years studying what he called the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny or repress. And when it comes to ignoring women, most men are operating from their shadow without realizing it. They're not practicing healthy detachment, they're acting out their wounded masculine energy in destructive ways. Here's what false ignoring looks like. You ignore her because you're angry she didn't respond fast enough. You withdraw attention as punishment for not getting what you want. You play games, trying to make her jealous or desperate. You become cold and cruel, hoping to hurt her the way you feel hurt. You use silence as a weapon rather than as a tool for self-development. Jung called this shadow possession, when your repressed emotions control your behavior without you realizing it. When you ignore someone from this place, you're not being strong or mysterious, you're being reactive and immature. And women can sense the wounded energy behind this behavior immediately. The false ignoring approach fails because it's still entirely focused on her reaction. You're ignoring her to get a response, which means you're still psychologically dependent on her behavior. You're still making her response the center of your emotional universe. You're still operating from neediness, just disguised as distance. Jung observed that this kind of manipulative withdrawal often triggers what he called psychological reactance. When someone senses they're being manipulated, they naturally resist. Instead of chasing you, she loses respect for you. Instead of missing your attention, she sees through your game and pulls away permanently. But here's what Jung discovered about the difference between healthy detachment and toxic withdrawal. Healthy detachment comes from fullness. Toxic withdrawal comes from emptiness. When you detach from a place of psychological wholeness, you're genuinely busy building your life. When you withdraw from woundedness, you're just punishing someone for not meeting your needs. The man practicing healthy detachment isn't thinking about her at all. He's genuinely absorbed in his own growth, his own purpose, his own life. The man practicing toxic withdrawal is obsessively focused on her response to his absence. He's checking to see if she's noticed, if she's reaching out, if his strategy is working. Jung emphasized that true psychological strength never seeks to hurt or manipulate others. The integrated man doesn't ignore women to punish them or make them jealous. He simply becomes so focused on his own development, so engaged with his own life, that he naturally has less time and energy available for anyone who isn't adding genuine value to his existence. This is the crucial distinction. Healthy detachment is about choosing yourself, not about rejecting others. It's about becoming so psychologically rich that you can afford to be selective with your attention. It's about developing what Jung called sovereign masculinity, a centered, grounded way of being that doesn't depend on external validation. When you operate from this place of genuine self-focus, something profound happens. Your ignoring doesn't feel like punishment to others. It feels like natural consequence. People sense that your attention has become valuable, that your time has become precious, that your energy has become selective. And this scarcity creates genuine attraction rather than resentment. The psychology of conscious detachment. Here's where Jung's understanding of human psychology gets really powerful. What most people call ignoring is actually the natural result of what he termed psychological individuation, the process of becoming so complete within yourself that you no longer need external validation to maintain your sense of worth. Jung discovered that when a man truly individuates, when he develops his own purpose, his own values, his own source of fulfillment, something extraordinary happens to his relationship with attention-seeking behavior. He doesn't have to try to ignore women because he's genuinely busy building something meaningful with his life. This creates what Jung called authentic unavailability, not the fake busyness of someone trying to appear important, but the genuine engagement of someone who has found his calling. When you're truly absorbed in creating something meaningful, when you're genuinely passionate about your growth and development, you naturally have less time and energy available for casual interactions. Jung observed that this authentic unavailability is incredibly magnetic because it's so rare in our attention-starved world. Most people are desperately seeking distraction, validation, and entertainment from others. But when someone encounters a person who is genuinely self-directed, who doesn't need external stimulation to feel alive, it creates a kind of psychological magnetism. Here's what happens in a woman's psychology when she encounters this kind of man. She senses that his attention is valuable because it's not freely given. She recognizes that his time is precious because he's invested in something meaningful. She feels that his energy is powerful because it's not scattered across dozens of meaningless interactions. Jung called this scarcity psychology. We naturally value what's rare and genuine. When your attention becomes a byproduct of your selectivity rather than your neediness, people start to recognize its worth. When your availability becomes limited by your actual commitments rather than your games, others begin to appreciate the time you do offer. But here's the crucial insight that Jung emphasized: this process must be genuine. You can't fake being busy or pretend to have a meaningful life. Women have what Jung called psychological radar. They can sense the difference between authentic self-focus and performed unavailability. The man who is genuinely individuating doesn't think about whether his detachment is creating attraction. He's too busy growing, creating, and building to focus on others' reactions. The man who is pretending to be detached is constantly monitoring for signs that his strategy is working, which immediately reveals his continued neediness. Jung found that this authentic self-focus creates what he called unconscious pursuit. Others begin to seek your attention not because you're withholding it, but because they can sense its genuine value. They start to wonder what you're so absorbed in, what's capturing your energy, what makes you so self-directed and purposeful. This is completely different from the wounded withdrawal that most men practice. Authentic detachment feels warm and centered to others, even though it's selective. Toxic withdrawal feels cold and punishing, even when it's obvious. The difference lies in the energy behind the behavior: fullness versus emptiness, choice versus reaction, sovereignty versus manipulation. The magnetic self-focus. Now we get to the heart of what Jung discovered about truly magnetic masculinity. The men who naturally attract others without effort are those who have learned to become genuinely fascinated with their own growth, development, and purpose. They've mastered what Jung called conscious self-absorption, being so engaged with becoming who they're meant to be that everything else becomes secondary. This isn't narcissism or selfishness. Jung was very clear about this distinction. Narcissism is an empty obsession with image and external validation. Conscious self-absorption is a rich engagement with authentic development and meaningful creation. The narcissist is still desperately seeking attention. The individuated man has found something more interesting to focus on. Jung observed that when you become genuinely absorbed in your own evolution, several powerful things happen simultaneously. First, your energy shifts from seeking to creating. Instead of looking for someone to fill your emptiness, you're actively filling yourself with purpose, passion, and growth. This energy is incredibly attractive because it's generative rather than consumptive. Second, your standards naturally rise. When you're busy becoming someone you respect, you lose tolerance for people and situations that don't align with your growing sense of self-worth. You become selective not because you're playing games, but because your time has genuinely become more valuable to you. Third, your presence becomes more powerful. Jung found that people who are engaged in meaningful self-development carry what he called purposeful energy. Others can sense that you're going somewhere, building something, becoming someone. This forward momentum is magnetically attractive because most people feel stuck or directionless. Here's what this looks like in practice. Instead of checking your phone hoping for her message, you're genuinely absorbed in a project that excites you. Instead of analyzing her responses, you're focused on developing skills that matter to you. Instead of crafting perfect texts, you're investing energy in becoming a more interesting person to know. Jung called this outcome independence through purpose engagement. When you're truly absorbed in meaningful activity, you naturally become less attached to specific outcomes with other people. It's not that you don't care about connection. It's that you're not desperate for it because you're already fulfilled. And here's what Jung discovered about women's psychology. They're unconsciously attracted to men who are clearly going somewhere. Not men who are trying to impress them with where they've been, but men who are actively building towards something meaningful. This forward momentum suggests psychological health, emotional maturity, and genuine confidence. When you operate from this place of authentic self-focus, your ignoring doesn't feel like withdrawal to others, it feels like natural prioritization. People sense that you're not avoiding them out of games or spite, but that you're genuinely engaged with something valuable. And this makes the attention you do offer feel precious, rather than manipulative. Jung emphasized that this approach works because it's honest. You're not pretending to be busy to create attraction. You're actually busy creating a life worth living. You're not withholding attention to manipulate. You're being selective because your time has become genuinely valuable to you. This authenticity creates what Jung called sustainable magnetism, attraction that doesn't depend on maintaining a performance or keeping up a facade. You become attractive because of who you're becoming, not because of what you're pretending to be. The integration protocol. Jung understood that knowing these principles intellectually is worthless unless you can integrate them into your daily life. So here's his framework for developing the kind of authentic self-focus that naturally creates attraction without manipulation or games. First, Jung emphasized what he called purpose identification, discovering what genuinely excites and motivates you beyond external validation. This isn't about finding your life's calling overnight, but about identifying activities, goals, and growth areas that capture your authentic interest. When you're genuinely excited about something, self-focus becomes natural and effortless. Start by asking yourself, what would you work on if no one was watching? What skills would you develop if no one would ever know? What would you create if you could never share it with anyone? These questions help you identify authentic interests versus validation-seeking activities. Second, implement what Jung called attention discipline, consciously redirecting your mental and emotional energy away from seeking external validation and toward building internal value. This means catching yourself when you're checking for responses, analyzing interactions, or seeking signs of approval, and immediately refocusing on your own development. Set specific times for checking messages and social media, rather than constantly monitoring for validation. Use the time you would have spent crafting perfect texts to work on skills that actually matter to you. Replace the energy you use to spend seeking attention with energy invested in becoming someone worth paying attention to. Third, practice what Jung called selective availability, being genuinely warm and present when you do engage with others, but making that engagement a conscious choice rather than an automatic response. This isn't about playing hard to get, it's about becoming someone whose time is genuinely valuable. Jung's challenge for you is radical. For the next 30 days, completely redirect your focus away from seeking any form of external validation and toward building something meaningful in your life. Don't ignore people to get a reaction. Ignore the impulse to seek reactions and focus on creating genuine value. Document this process. Notice when the urge to check for responses arises and redirect that energy toward your own development. Notice how your sense of self-worth changes when it's no longer dependent on others' responses. Notice how differently people respond to you when your attention becomes genuinely selective rather than strategically withheld. If you're ready for this level of self-development, comment, "I choose myself" below. Share this with someone who's ready to stop seeking validation and start building genuine value. Remember, Jung discovered that the men who naturally attract others aren't the ones using techniques to manage attention. They're the ones who have become so absorbed in their own growth that external validation becomes irrelevant. The next video will explore Jung's concept of anima integration and how developing your inner feminine qualities actually makes you more attractively masculine. This journey into authentic self-development is just beginning.